Hello, welcome to the 198th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by Tyler Cook, Chad Cunningham, and Alex J. Sherman. Thanks for being patrons, pals. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Oren Kaplan, and today we have Jonny Price, the head of fundraising for Wefunder, which is a website/platform that I had never heard of until Matt told me about it. And then Matt went on to raise like tens of thousands of dollars for a movie on it, despite all of my skepticism.
Yeah, it's a crowdfunding equity platform. Been made possible through some new laws that basically lets anybody be an investor. And so it's been a really cool and interesting opportunity for filmmakers to kind of reach out to a broader range of people to invest in their films. And I have a film that I am producing that my wife wrote and is directing called What Are You Doing New Year's? Quick plug, go to wefunder.com/whatayoudoingnewyears to check it out. I think it actually, all kidding aside, will kind of help give a little bit of context to the things that we talk about. But it's pretty darn similar to Kickstarter, except for that instead of just giving your money away, you're investing it. So you have the opportunity to earn it back in a number of different ways, depending on how you want to set up your deal. And filmmakers like Jim Cummings did it for his upcoming movie, The Beta Test, and Maceo Greenberg for Take Me to Tarzana, and a handful of others.
Yeah, and I think something that's interesting is like there's this cliche in the independent film funding world where you say when you're trying to raise money for your film, you find a rich dentist from your hometown and pitch them on your movie. And obviously the hard truth is that most people don't know rich dentists from their hometowns. But Wefunder kind of solves that problem and connects you with rich dentists from other people's hometowns that might want to invest in your film.
That's the truth. That's the goal, at least. So we talk about it a lot. You know, I think that it's important to just remind people, and I do this throughout the whole podcast, but just, you know, there's a lot of things to be really excited about with any sort of crowd equity platform, but also it's still a lot of work. There's still a lot that goes into making sure that you seal the deal. So Oren and I get pretty excited in this episode, but it is still not necessarily the dream come true that you're exactly hoping for. It could be, just like Kickstarter
like it
could
is.
be. I mean, I will say this.
Like, hasn't your dream come true?
Yes, that is true. It's like the amount of money that we have received has been very exciting and very astounding, and like that people continue to invest in the film and it grows and gets bigger and better is really, really incredible. Yes, that is true. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, you know, even though I have drunk the Kool-Aid, I think everyone has to figure it out for themselves. That's all.
Right. Before we get into our chat with Jonny, can I ask you two very honest and blunt questions that if you don't like, we can cut them out of the podcast?
Let's go for it. I'm feeling raw, Oren. It's been an emotional roller coaster.
Okay, good. Well, number one, and you're really not going to like this question, is do you think if you're not raising money for your movie, there's anything to get out of listening to this episode?
I think that if you have ever thought about raising money, or if you've ever wished that there was another way to do so, then it's worthwhile. If you're like, I do my art films and I self-fund them and I've got everything I need already, then skip it.
Or if you're only interested in like getting hired by a studio.
Yes. But I think the argument there is that in order to get hired by a studio, you have to have made a bunch of things. And one of the best things you can make is a feature.
Yeah.
And so unless you know a bunch of rich dentists, and you know we know people who do, then this is a way to raise that funding.
Right. But ostensibly a lot of our audience has made things and
yes, that is true.
And are getting called up by Bob Iger, head of Disney, on a daily basis, being offered Marvel movies.
Exactly.
I wonder who calls you to offer you a Marvel movie. Kevin Feige?
Yeah, I think so. I know Kathleen Kennedy calls you if you get a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, ready for my second honest, even more gut-busting question?
Yes.
So you're making a feature film. You're starting to film. Today's Monday, the 13th of January. You're going to start filming on Friday, the 17th of January. And your wife is the director.
Yeah. Hey, man, it's a partnership. She wrote a great movie. So we were like, let's do it.
And has this had any effect on your feature directing trajectory? Like, is it lighting a fire at all, or is it more like making you feel like, hey, I actually get like a equal, albeit different type of satisfaction from producing?
I would say it depends on the time of day, whether I'm like, oh, producing is really rewarding and special, or like, oh, I'll never do this ever again. I think that, and also I'm so grateful for all of the experience that I've gained even thus far, because it just informs everything else about the way that I will approach my next project. I think it's really helpful to do something on this scale and, with this sort of team and, kind of walk the line between really indie and something a little more fleshed out, and I think we're going to make something really special. And I think that all of the things that I've learned or had to reteach myself will inform that next project without a doubt. Like you can't help but make a mental checklist of like, oh, I do this thing differently, or I really loved the way we're doing this. And that's going to continue to evolve as soon as we're into it.
That reminds me of something that I've mentioned many times on the podcast. So I'll mention one more time before we jump into talking to Jonny, which is how my DP on my first feature, David Rom, asked me, he's like, are you one of those directors that like it's hour 14 and you're yelling at everyone to work harder and longer because you're making your passion project and this is very important? Or are you one of those directors that understands that everyone here is working for you and that you need to like show them appreciation and support, And it really like kind of changed my whole way of thinking about like almost kind of like above the line, below the line,
Mm-hmm.
And how much a passion project gives the creators versus the crew, and
Without a doubt.
the relationship that
Yeah.
dictates.
Yeah. And I think just making sure you take time to enjoy it,
Yeah.
I think is another thing that's important on this whole roller coaster.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, let's talk to Jonny. Let's figure out how to finance all of our dreams.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
But before we do that, you could check out our Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/justshootitpod, you can throw us $1 or $2. If you throw us 10, you get a Just Shoot It hat. And thanks so much for your support.
Yeah, our Patreon's kind of been on fire lately, which is very cool, and we're very excited, and we appreciate it. And you patrons will all be able to go for free to our next live event, which is going to be in March. Saying it right now.
It's going to be a good one. We've got some cool stuff cooking. So you can come talk to me about all of the craziness of the feature I'm just about to shoot, and also talk to some very cool filmmakers.
Yes, and we'll get you a date ASAP.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, let's talk to Jonny. Hello, Jonny Price, here on the podcast. Hey, buddy.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Jonny.
So, Jonny, you are the director of fundraising over at Wefunder, which is a crowd equity platform, which you guys, I think, kind of pretty commonly describe as like Kickstarter meets equity. So rather than giving somebody $25 and getting a T-shirt back or a board game or something, you're investing in the project or the product that people are raising funds for.
That's right.
Oh man, I nailed it. I feel like I've been telling a lot of people about the platform recently, so I feel like my
I'm
pitch is
redundant. I'm not even needed on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Jonny Price.
That was a great interview, guys.
That's a wrap. Thanks. But yeah, so Jonny, I think, this is a filmmaking podcast, and so I know that Wefunder covers a ton of different types of businesses, startups and apps and products and, kind of everything under the sun. But specifically, how does Wefunder work with filmmakers in those early stages? Say I'm a young filmmaker. I want to get my movie made. How do I start working with you guys?
Yeah. So I think the best way to think about Wefunder as a tool that filmmakers can use to raise capital is to just imagine a world where Wefunder didn't exist. And then it's, you want to shoot this movie, you have this vision for the movie. You're
That's
pretty
very
early.
easy for us, Jonny. That's very
Yes,
easy.
until a few months ago, you were in that world.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then, you're trying to raise capital, right? And you have a budget in mind, and maybe you've made movies previously, and you go to investors in those movies and say, hey, we worked together here. Let's work together again on this new movie. If it's your first movie, then you don't have that option. So as you guys probably know well, you're like kind of trying to scrape around like friends, family here and there, professional colleagues, connections from down the years. Um, you may look to a platform like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or what's the other one that's focused on movies, like
Seed and Spark.
Seed and Spark.
Seed and Spark, yeah, platforms like those. I actually don't know what the average raise is in the movie sector on Kickstarter, but I know that across all sectors on Kickstarter, average campaign raise is 25K, which is not that much money. There's kind of probably some saturation that's happened over the last few years. There's a lot of movies that are on Kickstarter. It sometimes can be quite hard to cut through the noise. And so
Right, the average Kickstarter campaign raises 25K?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Sounds high to me. That includes all the ones that raise like $10.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if that's like successful campaigns or all campaigns.
Yeah, I
but
wonder.
then you get some that are like $5 million, right?
Right. Okay.
But anyway, so the point is,
I'm on board.
You're in this world, like, and you're trying to raise capital, right? Basically, Wefunder can come in at that moment, and we aim to make it easier for you as someone that's making this movie to raise capital. And we do that in a few ways. I normally highlight three key ways. And we rely on this law called the Jobs Act that passed Congress in 2012. And then it took the SEC 4 years to roll it out. They rolled out the regulations in May 2016. And this law allows you to raise money not just from rich people, not just from accredited investors. If you've tried to raise money before, you've probably heard this term, accredited investors. Most companies that are raising money, they feel are constrained to raise from rich people, accredited investors. This law, the Jobs Act, which our founders helped to get through Congress, allows you to raise from unaccredited investors. So now, rather than just being restricted to raising money from millionaires and billionaires, you can go to your friends and family. You can go to your
Bernie Sanders supporters.
Bernie Sanders supporters love this film. The average contribution is so much less. So firstly, we help you raise from unaccredited investors, basically the entire US population and actually the international population too. Secondly, and this is another thing that the Jobs Act unlocked, you can publicly promote the offering. So normally when you're raising money, you have to do what's called private solicitation. You can't kind of go out on Facebook and tell everyone, hey, we're raising money for this film, and we're raising investment for this film. It has to be a lot more covert or clandestine. Obviously, Kickstarter is different, right? Because Kickstarter is not an investment. But if you're raising investment capital to make a movie, usually you have to do it through private solicitation. But what the Jobs Act and Wefunder enables you to do is to broadcast it. And you guys make movies, right? You're pretty good at like telling a story and marketing that yourselves and those movies. So we now, as a platform, enable you to, through social media or through an email blast or LinkedIn post or by going on a podcast like this one, you can really get the word out and direct people to the Wefunder campaign. And then the third way that we help movie makers raise more capital more quickly is that we have now over 300,000 investors on Wefunder, users on our platform, and we'll put the movie in front of them. And hopefully you raise some dollars from those guys as well. And so combination of raise from unaccredited investors, publicly promote the offering, and then get in front of Wefunder's investors. Hopefully we can help you expedite that fundraising process.
Yeah.
This third thing is the one that's kind of like the big, like the craziest part of it all, right? That you're introducing people that have no connections to investors. And I know that like on Kickstarter, you can advertise your campaign and I think other people can find it, but like On Kickstarter, it's like, yeah, my friend forced me to go on this and I feel guilty not donating. And like, am I really going to
Sure.
start searching through this website for other things I can just give away money to? But on Wefunder, it's a totally different thing. It's like, hey, I want to invest in some interesting things and be engaged and involved in what I'm investing in. And so you might be interested in like, diversifying your portfolio. I'll invest in like a tech startup and a feature film and, public works. I mean, I don't know what else.
Sure.
That's exactly right. And actually, as right in the intro, you're pitching Wefunder better than I am, because I should have made that very explicit from the outset. Probably the biggest way in which we can usually help companies, or in this case, movie makers, raise more capital than a perks-based platform like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, is that, as you say, Oren, investors are looking to make a rate of return, right? And so if you're getting a T-shirt, if you're getting whatever the perks are,
hey, the Just Shoot It stickers are pretty cool, okay, Jonny?
No disrespect to those Just Shoot It stickers. But yeah, if people really buy into the vision, and if you have a track record of making money on previous films and returning money to investors, especially, then someone might put in $10,000, or more. The average investment on Wefunder. Another interesting comparison to Kickstarter. The average pledge on Kickstarter is $80. The average investment on Wefunder is $1,000. So yeah, that's another way in which a powerful way in which we can oftentimes help you to increase the amount of capital you raise by offering a rate of return to investors if they buy into the vision and the economics.
Yeah, I should say, just to pause us right here, because I'm sure our listeners are about to crash their cars into the the lamppost.
Into
They're
the
so
Milwaukee
excited.
snowbank.
Yeah. I think a thing that
Don't crash your cars, listeners.
Yeah.
Grab
Slow
the
down,
wheel
guys.
with both
Slow down.
hands.
Yeah. As a person who's literally in the process of a raise right now and feeling excited and definitely having been connected with people there's no way in the world I ever would have met. A thing that Wefunder does that I think is really helpful is early on, like basically once you start setting up a profile, you have point people who can help walk you through different parts of the process, because it's not as simple as a Kickstarter. You have to file with the SEC. You have to have third-party accounting look things over. There's a lot of things that you're starting a business for real. You have to form a lot of infrastructure before you can start fundraising officially, because the government mandates it. But one of the things that I think you guys are quite good at, and Jonny, the way that we first met, is that you're vetting us to make sure that we can follow through. So there's a higher standard of quality of product on Wefunder, but also you guys are quite frank with us about it's a silver bullet. And so you put us in front of people that we wouldn't have met, but you're constantly answering questions where people are questioning whether or not your project is going to be good, or whether you can actually make money on it, or comparing you to things that have failed previously and how, what makes you better than them in public. Like if you go to our Wefunder page, wefunder.com/what are you doing New Year's, there's a lot of people who are calling us out explicitly and asking us why we think that we can do what we say we're going to do. And also, we've had a ton of behind the scenes Skype conversations with different people, and like all of those investors we wouldn't have met if it wasn't for Wefunder, but it's up to the filmmaker to close the deal.
Yeah.
And you guys said that. You said that to me straight up.
Exactly right. And the kind of the last 5 minutes or so of what I've been saying has been like pretty rose colored, as you say. People are crashing their cars with glee. But yeah, the other side is, if you are kind of struggling to raise capital, going back to that world in which Wefunder doesn't exist, if you can't raise capital in that world, sad to say, you probably also won't be able to raise capital on Wefunder, right? So what we tend to be is like a magnifying glass. It's like if you can raise capital from investors, if you can pitch investors and sell them and investing in you, we can help you amplify that and accelerate that. But if you have if you have an idea or a concept or a quotes business plan that you're really going to struggle to raise from investors in that world where Wefunder doesn't exist, we're probably not binary going to be able to all of a sudden help you raise the 100K that you need to shoot that movie.
Yeah. I think the nice flip side is that we, as filmmakers who have probably kickstarted before, the skills transfer quite cleanly.
Yes,
so there's
absolutely.
new things you have to learn, but like we already had our video shot and ready to go
Right.
because we knew that we wanted to have a pitch video for
Right.
forwarding on to people, like to
Yeah.
help close the deal and things. So it wasn't like we were starting from scratch on those materials.
Yeah, the marketing aspects, I think there's a lot of overlap, right? Like the
Mhm.
list building, the social media promotion, the drip sequence of emails, the like start with your friends and family, get money in, and then get them to get the word out to their network, et cetera, et cetera. Probably a lot of overlap on the marketing side. The economics piece is probably the biggest difference, right? Because the
Mhm.
pitch on the Kickstarter campaign is like, it's a cool just shoot it sticker, or like
Mhm.
it's the perks. The pitch we fund it is, we're budgeting this, and we're gonna this is our plan for distribution, this is our plan for revenue, this is our plan for how we're gonna take that revenue and distribute it to investors. Economic case that you're building up is probably the biggest difference in kind
Mhm.
of building up a funding campaign and pitching it to investors.
Yeah. And like I said, it's under scrutiny, not just
Yeah,
by you guys, but also the government. And then also,
right.
people who are trying to suss out whether they're going to invest their hard earned cash or not
Yeah,
in your movie.
yeah, absolutely.
Guys, I did not even realize that there was this ask a question section on the Wefunder page, which is what I've been reading while you guys have been talking about God
Oren's going
knows
to be
what.
asking Joe questions like, "What are you wearing right now?"
Yeah.
No,
Right.
these are really interesting. This is, yeah, Matt, I had no idea. Like, there's a person saying I've invested in movies and they haven't been profitable. Like, why is your movie profitable? And then people asking about SAG, asking about insurance, asking about completion bonds. Yeah, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Do you guys, like, if somebody was basically just a hater and came on there and told everyone like not to invest in films, would you guys, do you guys monitor or regulate or like kind of help?
We get usually the founders are, if there's stuff like that happening, then very quickly we hear about it from the founder. There's pretty strict rules that the SEC have laid out in terms of what questions we can and cannot take down. So someone can be pretty direct and challenging, and we won't be able to take it down. If they are, defaming or libelous or whatever those kind of mean legal words are, then if it's kind of egregious like that, then we can take it down. Obviously. But yeah, if someone's just like really not sold on the business, then usually that's something we keep up, which founders are always, wishing
Yeah.
that we had a little bit more leeway to take.
It's legal to be a hater, is what you're saying, Johnny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
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 Well, I think, having been on that side where I'm having to like deal with those hard questions, and sometimes people are, the film business is slightly different than everything else. And so people hear rumors or they hear horror stories, or
Yeah.
maybe they kind of like mix their jargon up a little bit. And so, I think it's very complicated to answer those questions because you also want to make sure that you present a positive tone. That's
Well,
also legal, like you can't overpromise anything,
yeah. Well, that's what I think. I would say I would maybe flip it a little, which I think is where you were going, Matt, with, which is, I think questions like that, hard questions, actually provide you a great opportunity.
they
Because
do.
if
Yeah.
someone's going to
Yeah.
invest in your movie, then hopefully they get that movies like oftentimes lose money, right?
Right.
If they don't get that, if they are expecting like this is definitely going to make me money 100% of the time, then you probably don't want them because that's setting like pretty
Mhm.
unrealistic expectations about the economics there. So, but most investors that are genuinely considering investment know what they're getting into, right?
Mhm.
And so kind of can see both sides. And it just gives you as the founder the opportunity to craft a thoughtful response to say that. Yes,
Yeah.
all movies don't make money. This is a risk that you are taking and considering investing in us. Please do not invest in this movie if you're not excited about our team and the vision and what we're trying to do, or if the story doesn't appeal to you, or however you want to address it. But I think oftentimes those hard questions, because you can then respond with almost, I don't know what the word is, grace, and kind of positivity, but just also intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
and almost like expose. It's like, well, of course, this is a risky investment. And by not being defensive about it, I think you can kind of really paint yourself in a positive light to anyone that's reading.
100%. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I hate giving Matt compliments, but his answer to what makes this movie special is pretty good.
Thanks, man. Well, it's a group effort. Shout out to Chrissy, who wrote and directed the movie, and Beat Shaheen, who is also producing the movie with me. I will say anecdotally, you get a real rush when someone who's kind of been going back and forth with you invests.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. Pretty great. I think the other thing that's interesting to think about in this part of the conversation is like, Oren, you always make the joke of like, if you were pitching a horror movie, people love to bring up Paranormal Activity, right? Cost $11,000.
Blair Witch Project.
Or Blair Witch Project. Yeah, whatever. Like something where it's like, it's an astronomical, huge moonshot win, but also, 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And, especially with Christmas movies, it's easy to look at Love Actually or Home Alone, made a billion with a B dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we obviously, that's a different time, a different place, a different audience set, and so it helps you craft language and find comps that are realistic for yourself and for the audience as well, so that you're looking at, recent Sundance comparables. You still want to, tell like this is the best case scenario story, right? And clarify that is the best case win, but that you're not promising or even hoping for something astronomically successful, or rather the astronomical success looks different today than it did 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as someone that has no idea about anything Wefunder related, can I ask you guys some questions about like kind of using your movie, Matt, as a case study?
Yeah, by all means.
Let's do it.
So, Matt, you said this is unlike Kickstarter or Indiegogo, where it's not like you just like click and your campaign is going. You have to set it up and everything, but you don't have to spend a lot of money to get those campaigns going. But Matt, you said for this, you have to be a legitimate company. You have to do all that stuff. Can you guys kind of talk about the average expense it costs just to set up the campaign on Wefunder?
Do you want to answer that, Matt?
I mean, I can say, and maybe Jonny, you can chime in with whether or not this is typical or if I blew my money a couple of different ways. But we started a LLC, which can be relatively cheap on like Rocket Lawyer or, LegalZoom. There's a handful of places where you can do that stuff. We expedited ours because we wanted that EIN a little faster, so we ended up paying a premium for it.
Which is the federal ID number that you use for all your accounting.
Yeah. So we basically had to create a company for the film rather than use my own company just to keep things clear and concise and self-contained, basically, which is a thing that I think filmmakers are used to, but also is, money up front. And then also we had to have a third-party CPA, accounting firm, look through our books. Even though we were literally, at that point, we were a company that was 10 days old, you still have to jump through all the hoops of any other company that's been in business for a while and looking to raise again, all of that stuff. And so that cost us about $1,500, I want to say. So like we were probably about $2,000 in before we were able to launch, and that's before we're cutting a video or shooting a video or any of that stuff.
Okay.
No egregious missteps there.
Good.
I feel like you definitely need to have an LLC set up. So if you don't already have that, getting that set up and then getting the
and that's like $800, right? Or well, I guess there's the fee to set it up plus annual
taxes. Yeah. So the taxes of $800, I think, is a different cost that we haven't incurred yet.
Oh, okay.
And then on the CPA review side, the only thing to highlight is if you're raising less than $107,000, then you don't actually need to pay that independent CPA to do the review of your accounts. So then you don't incur the $1,500 that you mentioned, but then you're limited to raising 107K. Yeah, so I think we've had a few movies on Wefunder that have very, very small budgets, or for whom Wefunder is part of the total raise, and they launch with 107K raise, and therefore have relatively kind of free financials. The other thing to highlight on the financial side is if the company is more established, which for the most part with movies it is like you, Matt, a pretty blank sheet of paper. But if there are financial transactions, if there's a financial history, then that CPA review can end up being a little bit more than $1,500.
Yeah. I basically paid them to look at a page full of zeros.
Yeah, that's painful, right?
Yeah,
look at a page full of zeros. Here's $1,500.
Yeah. But also, I think it does help just emotionally and mentally to say, oh, okay, well, I'm doing this right. And I think that's the thing that I think filmmakers are taught how to shoot movies, right? And there's very rarely like a true business of film like DIY class, and so starting your own company, doing all of this to prepping to raise capital, I think is something that it's quite when you hear about other producers talking about it, like it's quite intangible, And so having people to like walk you through those steps, I think was really invaluable for us. We wouldn't have been able to do it if we didn't have help.
Yeah, and that's one of the roles we try to play is in the kind of upfront conversations and quote screening. We try to assess, do we think you have a realistic shot here of raising this money, or do you need to put in place a few more blocks before we embark down this road? Because from our side, we don't get any revenue unless you meet your minimum goal. Like if you miss your minimum goal, which usually is 50K, then we're not getting any revenue from that. So it's been a waste of our time financially. But then on your side too, like if you raise 30K, fall short of that 50K minimum, then you've done the LLC registration, you've done the financials, you've put all this effort in, and you end up with nothing. And so from both of our perspectives, we're pretty aligned that we want to have a pretty high success rate here. And so we try to assess these things early on in the conversation. And, I'm oftentimes recommending to people that they don't go forward with Wefunder campaigns, but try to focus on finding one or two investors outside of the platform first to prove that there's a demand from investors here before then coming back and re-engaging.
Interesting. How important do you think it is to have a video in order to have a successful Wefunder campaign?
I would say that in this industry, you should do it because, I just think it's almost like weird for an investor if you're like, hey, give me money to make a movie, but there's no like video on the campaign. I don't think it needs to be super kind of, glossy or like expensively produced. But at least something. One of my favorite Wefunder campaigns was this brewery in San Diego called Modern Times. They raised $1 million in 4 days, almost entirely from their own existing customer base. And their video was just their founder talking into a camera for a couple of minutes about his vision for how he wants to build a company that's like owned by the customers. And that was.
But he chugs a beer every 10 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, they're just they're duct taped to his hands. Actually, that would be pretty good. Yeah, it's funny because Jonny, I think when you're kind of setting up and there's all the tutorial pages and stuff, there's a lot of language that's like, hey, don't make your video look too slick. Don't make it too. Yeah. Don't look like you're trying too hard. And it's a very Silicon Valley sort of mentality, Yeah.
Startup.
Yeah, and as a filmmaker, I was like, well, our video can't look bad, you know?
Yeah. That is a good point. I mean, there are a couple of ways sometimes in which I think our platform is it was initially geared towards helping tech startups to raise, right? And over time, we've kind of then helped breweries and restaurants, and now we're seeing more and more movies. I just quickly looked. I think we've now funded 18 movies on Wefunder, and that number's growing. So
You
there's a
don't know
couple
what
of
the average raise for a movie on WeFunder is, do you?
so I can try to find that out. When you guys are talking, I'm going to do that analysis.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I sat down with a few people, my pal Maceo,
Yeah,
who did Take Me to
Take Me to
Tarzana,
Tarzana, yeah.
and
Basically, it's awesome.
yeah, he's so positive, so sweet. I've known him
Yeah.
actually for a long time. My childhood friend went to college with him. But so I had like a decent amount of anecdotal evidence of like, oh, like these people who are like in the same world as me are raising
Yeah.
significant amount of money,
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to make it sound like we just, launch the page and now we're rich,
Mhm.
It's still a significant grind and there are like a lot of complicated, hard parts of it, but that gave me a lot of, I was very excited and felt more confident about making it happen in the first place.
240K is the answer. Thank you for
Oh, wow.
talking there for a few seconds, Matt, because you
Sure,
enabled me to run that analysis
sure.
quickly.
That's the
240K
average?
is the average, yeah,
Wow,
um,
that's
for the
high.
movies that we funded. So, Take Me to Tarzana raised 170K. The beta test raised 400K.
No, that's
Uh,
Jim Cummings' movie, right?
that's
Mhm.
Jim Cummings, yeah.
Natalie Metzger. Yeah.
Voyage Media raised 376K. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, you look at someone like Jim Cummings, who's got this like giant social media following, and he probably could have raised a ton of money on Kickstarter as well, but WeFunder gives him, it's probably, you feel better about that money you're raising.
Hmm.
Um, but I think someone like Matt or me or someone that doesn't have like, hundreds of thousands of followers,
Hmm.
the fact that I'm looking at your page today when we record this, I'm sure this will not be true when this airs, but you have $78,045 raised from 96 investors. And you guys obviously are promoting it on Facebook and everything, but I feel like so much of that money is not coming from you guys just like begging your friends and family to invest. It's coming from people that are like, that you don't know, that are genuinely interested and discovered the movie through WeFunder. Do you know what
Yeah.
percentage of your investors are, or of
Are
the
strangers?
investment? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, I think that it's the first, so WeFunder has like very specific thresholds in terms of when they promote you and when you're live on the site and all sorts of things like that. And so I think that the amount of money raised at the very beginning was mostly friends and family. And then slowly, as it gains momentum, more strangers become a part of the project.
Yeah, that's very typical. So in the early days, usually, the movie maker or the founder is going to their network, friends, family, people that are close to them. This is how I would run a campaign. Then they're going kind of to the more extended network, maybe it's Facebook, LinkedIn, kind of a little bit more outbound marketing. And then the WeFunder investors, it's basically the more traction you get from your own outreach, the more visibility you will get with our investor base. And when they click on the campaign, they'll see more traction, so they'll read more and consider investing with like social proof and credibility. So that's very typical. On average, across all WeFunder campaigns, we've now funded about $120 million to a few more than 300 companies over the last few years. And about 50-50, it's split between first-time investors to WeFunder and repeat existing WeFunder investors who are making repeat investments. In the movie sector, I honestly don't know how that breaks down. It could be more or it could be less. I would somehow imagine that it's probably more are coming from first-time investors. So maybe it's like 60-40 or 2/3, 1/3, where it's coming from more of the money is coming from new investors, just because I think Wefunder's existing investor base historically has been more interested in tech companies or, and movies is a relatively new theme for us that Legion M have really been pushing. And with Jim and from the beta test, he's sent like probably a dozen filmmakers our way and said, yeah, could be a great option for you guys. So I would imagine it's probably more coming from your network than the typical campaign, but it'd be an interesting analysis. I probably won't be able to do that one in the time it takes you guys to say this thing, but maybe in the show notes. How about that? Put
Sure,
that in the show notes.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. This is crazy. When I type in film into the search on Wefunder, the top thing that comes up is "What are you doing New Year's?"
Oh, good.
Matt's movie. But if I type in movie, the first thing that comes up is that Christmas movie.
Oh, sure. Well, I think the title of "What are you doing New Year's" is actually film :
Yeah.
What are you doing New Year's?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Invest
just
in
because I wanted
film
people
movie.
I wanted people to know. Yeah, I think there's I suspect that there's maybe a little bit of an advantage for films right now in that there aren't a ton relative to the rest of the investment opportunities, and everybody knows what a movie is and everyone watches movies.
Yeah.
So that I think there's like a little bit more glamour than, some of these other really great ideas that are hopefully quite profitable as well, but it's easy to, throw a couple $100 at a movie because it's fun to talk about,
I think one of the things that people use Wefunder for, and I mean investors, right? Of course, you're looking to make a return and make money. That's most of our investors are evaluating that and how they're making their decision on who to invest in. But I think another huge part of it is like, being an angel investor is cool. You get to like be a part of creating something. You get to like be a part of that team. Maybe there are perks along with their investment. Typically, I'm not sure, Matt, what you guys have in terms of perks, but we've seen some movies where it's like if you invest $5,000 and you get to come and hang out on the set with us, or get to come to our premiere. And so that element of like, this isn't just about the financial returns, but it's about being a part of something, getting involved with Hollywood, making movies. That's like really cool that like most people don't get to be a part of. And especially if you're like in that world, you're an actor, you're an actress, or you're an aspiring producer, or you're like studying movies in college, then to get to be able to like participate in that for $100 in a way that's normally exclusively reserved to millionaires is really cool, and I think that's a lot of the motivation for probably the majority of our investor base.
Yeah, I would agree. It's easy to forget how fun making movies is, and I would say that also we email every single one of our investors and ask them, why basically, what did you like about it, and I think there was a lot of anecdotal evidence to back up that point.
Yeah.
Wait, you email your investors and ask them why they decided to invest?
Yeah.
And then you take their answers and feed them to the next investor? Sounds like a pyramid scheme.
I think we try to figure out what we're doing right, and I think one of the things that they talk about is like, that we are quite prompt in terms of responding to people, even when they ask hard questions, I think has been a thing that multiple people have brought up. And so I think that all kind of speaks to the point of just like how much energy and work it takes to do one of these raises.
Yes.
Right. Cool. Well, Jonny, can you give us any tips from these 18 films that have been funded on Wefunder of like any advice, like what you've seen works and any advice as to what you've seen doesn't work?
Yeah. So I think that would highly recommend. It's kind of going back to what I said earlier. Like if you couldn't raise any money if Wefunder didn't exist, like you'll probably struggle to raise money in a world where you're trying to raise it on Wefunder, right? So it's almost like try to kind of raise money initially, like try to find investors, pitch people through kind of private solicitation, which is where you're just pitching people privately, and start to get some interest and start to see kind of or like put together the terms of the offering, right? And like how are we going to distribute profits here, and start to think through some of these things. And then if you can start to get some bites and some interest, and people are taking a look at you and connecting you to other people, then at that point I think Wefunder can be a platform that can help to accelerate that. And then once you launch a campaign, I think probably similarly to if you've done a Kickstarter before, it's like start with people that are closest to you. I use this language of concentric circles. So if I was running a Wefunder, I would start with like my mum and dad and my sister, and my kind of close friends and family, and people that have known me for years, and I try to get them to come in sooner through like individual outreach on the phone, meeting them in person for coffee.
And
Then
do you have to have a minimum investment? Like, could you literally have them each put $1 in, or is there? I know, like on Matt's film, there's $100 minimum investment.
Yeah, we're not quite Bernie Sanders levels or Yang Gang levels. Got to get my Yang Gang in there. But no, $100 is the minimum that we allow on the platform.
Oh, across Wefunder. Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
You can set a higher minimum, so you can set a minimum of $1,000 if you want, somewhere between that $100 and a $1,000 range.
Oh, interesting.
And so then once you've done the kind of inner concentric circle, then you spread out to like social media, or if you have an email list that you've been building up. Obviously, if you did a Kickstarter campaign before, you've got those emails of Kickstarter backers, so you can email them. And then, maybe there's like podcasts or blogs or some sort of, PR that you can get around it as you go to those outer concentric circles. But I think starting with the people that know you best is a good plan of attack.
Cool. And then, in terms of like the actual content, do you feel like people respond to, like, it seems, I mean, from Matt's movie, it seems like people are responding to the material, but also the team that has kind of, especially Chrissy, the director, has like, as an actor, has like a lot of really well-known credits and things like that.
Yeah, I think team is super important. I think one thing as well, just going back to the differentiation of Wefunder and people's motivations for investing versus like a Kickstarter is the economics, right? So if you can set out like, this is my plan for how I'm going to spend the money and then how we're going to make the money. Here are some comparisons of other movies that have had a similar budget with these kind of outcomes. If it's like if it's like the last 3 movies I made all were profitable, that's the kind of information which when an investor sees that, they're like, oh, that's cool. Because like if an investor's investing in a tech startup CEO, if his last company exited, was bought by Salesforce for $1 billion, then he's going to have a lot of investors lining up for the next company. So is the case here. If you had a good economic financial outcome on the last movie, highlighting that is a pretty compelling data point for anyone looking at the campaign.
Right. Cool.
Oren, I am looking to you to put on your skepticism hat.
Yes.
And ask us some hard questions here, right?
Because Oren.
Okay, if you're sure, I got a lot of them.
Because I'm like, I'm in the middle of the raise. The shit hasn't hit the fan for me entirely yet. Like we had a really great week, and so it's harder for me to. I can tell you what I'm worried about making this movie, but like that's a different question, right? So Oren, I know you've got something up your sleeve. What do you got?
Well, I guess for starters. And I know this is with all crowdfunding. Like, if I have to hit 60 grand to get the money, and I'm at 50 grand, is there anything stopping me from putting in the last 10 grand myself?
Yeah, that is not allowed. So technically, if we see a founder do that to get themselves over the hump, we would ban that. It's a blurred line, right? Because it's like, well, if I like kind of give my dad 10K and then he invests in me, is that okay? And so it's quite hard to police in practice, but kind of technically the answer is no, you're not supposed to do that.
Because even if you come $1 short of your your kind of minimum goal, then you don't get anything, right? And you've kind
Yeah,
of spent this money putting together this LLC, getting the CPA,
yeah,
taxes, all that stuff, and you're
yeah.
end up at a
Which
negative,
is
right?
why I'm often discouraging people from launching weekly campaigns, because that's just a terrible outcome for everyone. I think if you get really close, right, then like if you can raise like 58K, you're pretty compelling as a person that's like pitching your investment, and you've got a decent network, and now you've got hundreds of investors in, or dozens of investors. And so if you can get that close, like it's almost certain that you'll be able to raise the next 2K just from like hustle. But yeah, if you get to 40K and you need minimum of 60K, then that's a painful failure for everyone.
In that situation, would you allow extending the campaign? Like, oh, we just want to extend it by a week because we think we can hit it.
Yes, you can extend the deadline of your campaign. Um, the maximum that we allow companies to raise for is 8 months. So it's quite a long time.
Oh yeah, that is a good amount of time. And
Well, and
then
also there are specific rules about how long you can raise right, where it's like if you go over 6 months, you have to refile something, or I
Yeah,
can't
so
remember. Yeah.
so for you guys, if you go beyond April 30th, you'll need to submit 2019 financials as well. So
Yes.
depending on kind of when you launch the campaign in the year, you need the financials from the previous 2 years. So, but yeah, generally speaking, 8 months is the
And then once, just out of curiosity, like, so let's say Matt raises like 100 grand by the end of their campaign. How do they get that money? Is it like a check or it just transfers into your bank account or how? It's
yeah.
cash, right?
Yeah, so essentially, we will wire it to the bank account of the LLC.
And then, and
And
WeFunder
we'll
takes a cut,
subtract.
right?
Yes, I was just going to say we subtract a. So part of the cynical thing is like, yeah, we do charge for this. We charge 7.5% of the amount that you raise. So if you raise 100 grand, we keep $7,500 and send you $2,500.
Okay. And then, how, once like the investment, the funding round is closed or whatever the terminology is, how is there accountability? Like, how can the investors keep track of what's being done with the money? Are there like
Yeah.
SEC rules of like reporting or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the SEC requires that companies that run a regulation crowdfunding campaign. This is what the federal exemption, the way of raising capital, is called regulation crowdfunding, sometimes abbreviated to Reg CF. But if you run a regulation crowdfunding campaign, you need to file 3 annual reports with the SEC. We've built a tool that enables you to do that. You need to provide financial updates on the business. They do not need to be reviewed by an independent CPA, but you do need to provide financial updates every, before the end of the tax year. So, Matt would do it in like 2021, 22, 23, as long as the company is still operating through there. But that's the only kind of reporting requirement, and that's a pretty light one.
Right.
Cool.
And that's just another reason to have a separate entity, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, we have a tool that you can do that through the Wefunder platform, and we take care of distributing that to all your investors.
Yeah. I imagine by using WeFunder, you are saving, like, I know when uh, I made a movie and we, did it the traditional way, just trying to meet rich people and seeing if they'll give us their money. And we had a lawyer. We had a lot of people that we paid to help us with taking these investments and making it all
Yeah.
kosher. And
Yes.
so I imagine that's actually a good chunk of spending you don't have to do because WeFunder is kind of facilitating a lot of that for you.
That's right. Normally, a movie company will kind of pay a lawyer to get the investment contract set up at the outset, or we have now kind of template agreements that you might be able to recycle to save some costs there. But then that investment contract is what you're offering to all investors, and it's kind of take it or leave it, right? And in some respects, that you might then have some investors who, well, they want this special term or this special clause in the contract, and so they're not willing to invest because there's not much flexibility. But on the other hand, yeah, you don't have to worry about incurring legal fees for every new investor that you're bringing on. And by the way, that investor that wants that special term, if they're going to write you a large enough check, then you can always just run open up a separate what's called a regulation fee round and take that money from them as long as they're an accredited investor outside of Wefunder in parallel. So we're not even kind of preventing you from taking that money either. That's how one of the ways in which hopefully we can streamline some of the administrative costs and pain of raising money.
Right.
And Jonny, remind me, what did we agree Just Shoot It earns on every film that signs up hereafter? Was it 5 or 7%?
29% of the amount raised, right?
Yeah, you're a great negotiator. So
just kidding.
Yeah.
We'll do 23%. Just so that us and Wefunder together will be 30.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think honestly, most of my skepticism was eviscerated by your campaign. I don't think it's a secret to our listeners that I'm not a big fan of crowdfunding. I think it's weird to ask your friends to give you money so you can, do your hobby or whatever, But I do think Wefunder is very cool because it's not asking your friends for money. It's like asking people to invest in a business that you're building. And I think it's important for our listeners to know that the kind of barrier to entry is significant. Like we talked about, you have to invest some money. You have to make a video. You have to
build out a compelling plan.
Yeah. And like you said, Jonny, you have to kind of put some kindling in there to get the fire started before you get the momentum. But for me, I don't know. Like my experience over the last 2 weeks has been just talking to my wife like, whoa, Kara, do you know Matt and Chrissy raised like $35,000? Oh, do you know they raised 40,000? Do you know 45? And then Matt's like, yeah, I think we might have 20 coming in from some investor. And I'll be like, how did you meet this investor? Because I want to meet them. And Matt says, I just met them through WeFunder. And it's just like, we've heard of many, many, many people raising money for their films. And I've never kind of seen it go this way before. So I'm like, the skeptic in me is gone.
Oh, man.
Oren, I like you. You can come to work for Wefunder on our business development team anytime the movie making doesn't work out.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, it's not like Matt, it's not like this team of people is coming from nowhere. They have like so much experience put together, but they're not celebrities. And so I think it's like this kind of sweet spot between the first time filmmaker and Zach Braff,
Yeah, that's actually a great. I think that's a really, really powerful insight. It kind of ties to what I was saying earlier. Like, if WeFunder didn't exist, if you really just wouldn't be able to raise any money, then like we're probably not going to be able to like suddenly help you raise $200,000, right? But exactly right. It's like that kind of like sweet spot in between the celebrity of like a Jim Cummings and someone that's like a total novice. I mean, we can help. I would say even if it's your first movie. We've seen, for you to be successful, you can make that work. But I think you're right. The sweet spot is where Matt and the team are at.
Yeah, people that have the goods to back it up, and are just looking to connect to the people that are interested. So.
Yeah, well, that was great, guys. I think it's funny to hear you say all of that, Oren, because like, as a person who hasn't slept in a month and is like, prepping the movie and also, watching the money come in and all of that stuff, I think, I do want to just make sure that everybody knows, like, we were early to market. We've got a very specific plan. It's a Christmas movie. And so it's a genre movie, effectively. It's like a horror movie or an action movie. It's got repeat viewing potential. Like, there's a lot of very specific things that we baked in. And I think it is interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see once more movies hit the crowdfunding scene, because I think we're still, pretty new, right? And there are other platforms out there that are doing it as well. But like, there was another Christmas movie on Wefunder, and so we immediately drew comparisons. People were like, "Well, these people did X, Y, and Z. Are you going to do the same? And so I think that as the marketplace becomes more populated with films, I think that it will become a different landscape, obviously. And I'm very excited and very curious to see how it all pans out, because I think that it is on filmmakers ethically and as like a bigger picture sort of for the good of all other artists, to put your money where your mouth is and really like, make it work, do your very hardest to make sure that the film is successful so that you don't ruin it for everyone else.
Good note to end on. Stop ruining things for me.
Don't ruin it for everyone else, guys.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, Jonny, this was great. Can you stick around and endorse with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Unpaid endorsement.
So my unpaid endorsement, I learned about from Wefunder, actually. It's the web app Calendly, which is what you guys all use to schedule meetings with people. So if anyone is ever like, oh man, like, when can I find a time to meet with you? You send them a Calendly link, and the increment can either be 15 or 30 or an hour, and it will just give them the options of times. The other person clicks what time they're free, and then everybody's set up on their calendar, basically. So it's a way of giving people visibility without like them seeing every little meeting and thing you have carved out in your day.
Cool. I'll check
Jonny,
it out.
is that an accurate way of describing Calendly?
Yes, Calendly is awesome. It saves me just so much time in terms of scheduling. Highly endorse it.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay. I'm going to endorse 3 things. As usual, they're all lazy endorsements, but I'm going to do them. Wait, hold on. 3 things. How did I just forget one of them? Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. First one is, I feel like everyone, at least in Hollywood, in LA, like whenever you go to any party at this time of year, everyone is just talking about what movie, like all like the award season movies. And I know everyone in LA knows about this movie, Uncut Gems, with Adam Sandler, but it's just like so good. I don't think it was nominated for anything, but I highly recommend for our listeners to see it, because it's just like a nonstop adrenaline rush with like amazing performances, great storytelling, and just like the filmmaking is really, really good. It's kind of a stressful movie. I wouldn't go if I was like I wouldn't watch it on drugs or anything, but I really enjoyed it. Matt almost saw it with me, but then he agreed. He decided not to, even though it was at the movie theater across the street from his house.
That is true.
My second endorsement. They're not paying us for this, so this does not count at all as a paid endorsement. But, MusicBed was one of our sponsors, and I wasn't really using them while they were sponsoring us because I didn't really have a need for any music. But I've been editing this podcast, this scripted podcast that my friend and I made, and I used almost exclusively MusicBed music. And the more I used it, like the more I kind of fell in love with it, because it just felt like it did not feel like library music in the way that like my previously favorite music library, Extreme Music, started to feel. Like everything started feeling so familiar to me, and MusicBed really like let me discover kind of these sounds that felt more like just real music. I don't know, like stuff you would hear on the radio. It's hard because a lot of their stuff has lyrics and they don't have a lot of instrumental stuff, but I'm really getting into it. And then my third thing, kind of related on that note, is I have this like gigantic sound effects library. I think I have like 600 gigs of sound effects. But when I was editing this podcast, I had found a ton of audio on YouTube. Like I wanted an ambience of like a food court at a mall, and nothing in my sound effects library was quite right. So I just like tried to find videos of people like walking around malls and not saying anything. And I like would just pulled audio from all these places on YouTube. It's probably not even legal to do it. But I just found like the best audio on YouTube, because like I needed sounds of a drone flying, and you just like look up a drone video and then you just, rip the video off YouTube and pull out the audio. And it's just like my new favorite place to find like ambience and sound effects, and just like if I'm setting a scene at a high school, I just like go look for like a high school, volleyball game, and I can just pull the audio out and put it in the background of my clip. And so those are, I'm just really enjoying YouTube for audio as like a source for audio for my editing. That's it.
Well, Jonny, that's a real smattering of different endorsements.
Yeah, I'm trying to give you 3 examples of the
appreciate
types
it.
of things you can endorse.
Even with that significant amount of time, I have terrible endorsements. But I'm going to endorse 8 Sleep. So my wife and I got 8 Sleep, which is like an electronic heated mattress. And I think it's
What's it called?
It's called 8, like the number 8 Sleep. And I guess it's like a little bit sexed up versus like conventional like heated mattresses that like my mom and dad used to have like 50 years ago, because it's like an app on your phone, so you can like set it, and then kind of, if you're just gonna get in bed in like 15 minutes time, you can like set it to come on, so that then like by the time you get in, it's like super warm, and then it can like go off after 30 minutes or so. So I think that's helping me sleep more. I have 2 young kids, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so any extra minutes of sleep are highly, highly valued. So I would endorse 8 Sleep. And then the other one, huge self-call, but we have this podcast, Adventure Capital, for Wefunder, where we basically just interview founders. We're starting to do a few others as well. We interviewed a securities lawyer recently on sexing up securities law. She was really awesome. But we interviewed Jim Cummings of the Beta Test on his experience raising capital on Wefunder. So especially for your audience, it's another kind of interview, probably a 45-minute interview on his experience raising Wefunder. He tells this really funny story of how he raised some money super quick, and then he actually had to kick people out of the round because he was oversubscribed. And I can't remember the co-producer's name, but his dad was one of the people that they had to kick out. So they had to kick out his co-producer's dad because they were oversubscribed, which I thought was like pretty kind of sad. But also yeah, so that's Adventure Capital.
I wish we all had Jim Cummings problems like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, and sorry, what's the name of the podcast one more time?
Adventure Capital.
And is it on iTunes and everywhere?
Yes. Anywhere you would find your podcast, etc., etc.
Cool. And then how about you, if we want to find you on social media? Do you tweet or Instagram?
Yes, I'm Jonny C. Price, Jonny C. Price at Twitter, and LinkedIn. I'm Jonny at wefunder.com, Jonny at wefunder.com if you want to email me. And I'll either speak to me or someone on my team about going a little bit deeper on where you're at and whether Wefunder is a good fit for you to work with.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking to us. If you want to find out more about the podcast or have any questions for us, you can email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. We are on all social media at justshootitpod. Matt is at Mr. Matt Enlow. I'm mostly on Instagram at okaplan. And this episode was edited by Jonathan Luna. Our webmaster is Ewan Williams, and the music you're listening to is from the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. And we'll catch you next time.